Hello and welcome to the Gold, Goats, and Guns podcast for July 5th, 2024. My name is Tom Luongo, and we have a lot to talk about. It is episode 182. It's a Friday, and yesterday we had British elections and Independence Day and all the rest of it. And well, as it was, I was supposed to speak with him last week on Sean Newman's podcast, but schedules just didn't kind of work out. So I have my friend Alex Krainer back on, and since Sean is on vacation for the next month, the slacker, I wasn't going to be able to talk to Alex for over a month, and that's just not acceptable. So let's have Alex back on the podcast. He's always a welcome and popular guest. So, Alex, great to talk to you this Friday afternoon. How are you, my friend? We'll talk. What's going on?
I'm well, thank you, Tom. Enjoying the summer. I'm on a semi-vacation, but kind of not really. Mm-hmm. And yeah, there's a whole lot to talk about, but I kind of have the impression that maybe the most important things that are happening under the kind of bubbling under the surface, and they're not manifesting yet. But I think they may be about to.
Okay.
And what I'm talking about is the tensions in Europe,
right?
Which it seems to me might blow up into some kind of a civil war scenario, which is nothing we expect, nothing we got used to. And if you read the media, there's no indication of it. Everything is like this election, that election. The populists are on the rise. Well, they don't call them populists. They like to call them far right.
Nazis.
And but there's real discontent. There's discontent in the police forces, in the militaries, and there's a very narrow circle of people who are plugged into the power structures, who are, it seems to me, in a panic,
right,
and who are trying to hold on to power by hook or by crook. But it's almost like a situation where there's a tsunami of popular discontent rising against them, and they have no way to turn it back. And everything they want to do is opposite of what the people want. Namely, right. They want tighter control over the monetary policy. They want a tighter control over our access to our own money, right? They want to introduce CBDCs. They want another run at a pandemic scenario, I guess, the bird flu thing. And they want us all to get deeper and deeper into debt for the benefit of the military-industrial complex. And they want to start recruiting our children to become soldiers and train them up for the next war against Russia. And so this is all contrary exactly to what the people want in Europe. And so, if you read the newspapers, if you watch the televisions, if you listen to the radio, it's kind of, elections and this and that and the economic crisis, and they're promising stabilization and the takeoff in GDP growth and all these things that don't really seem real. But I had, over the last few weeks, I had several conversations, ordinary conversations with people, but let's say in France, who are close to the military circles. Mm-hmm. And they tell me that people in the military circles in France actually expect the unraveling of this crisis to devolve into a civil war.
Wow.
Okay. And then I spoke yesterday with a friend in Germany who is actually a highly ranked member of the AfD party.
Okay.
And he told me that the German police, secret police, and the courts are working together. And using his words, he said that they are coming down at the people who are, let's say, dissidents, who are not the friends of the current government, that their actions are scandalous, and extremely devastating to people that they target.
Wow. Okay. Do you have any concrete examples of this, Alex? This is just I mean I don't doubt you in any way, manner, shape, or form. I just wanted if you could put a little more color on that, great.
Not because he didn't mention anything concrete,
Okay.
but he did describe to me several incidents where, oh yeah, the media also is in the same,
Right.
thing. There was an incident when Robert Habeck, the economics minister, at the beginning of the farmer protest, he was going to visit some farm on some island, and then he came back. And the farmer protest, the people who eventually organized farmer protests, they were on land when he was returning on the ferry boat. And what they did is they came to the ferry dock with their tractors, and they turned on the lights on their tractors at the ferry at which Habeck was returning.
Mm-hmm.
And Habeck got scared out of his wits, and he refused to go to get off the boat. But the media painted it as like they were going to lynch him. Nobody, there was no people who were there. They said like there was not even a hint of any kind of a violence. They came to make a point. They turned on their flashlights, the
Headlights,
the headlights
mm-hmm.
at the ferry, but that was it.
Right.
And the media and they tried to prosecute the organizers of this. So concrete examples I can't give you because he didn't share that with me.
Sure.
And even even talking to them, he's like, I have to be careful what I tell you because I'm sure that they're listening to me. And so but anyway, people are very.
It's like the Stasi of return.
Yes. It's like Gestapo pretty much. Yeah. But it's one thing when people are afraid of the repression that the government can unleash against them. Mm-hmm. But the discontent, the grievances are not going anywhere. It's not, the thing is not improving. So, they can make an example of some people here and there. They can try to intimidate and scare people, but in the end, that doesn't work. I mean, again, I lived through that when the communism was imploding. You had the same thing. They were the communists were scared. They were in a panic. They wanted to, discourage any kind of dissent. They wanted to make an example of dissidents. They wanted to have this great censorship program, getting people to rattle on each other, getting people to call like emergency numbers if they see something,
Right. If you see something, say something. We have that here in the United
States. Exactly. If you see something, say something. And it didn't work. And so, I don't know how things are in Spain. I don't know how things are in Italy. I think in Italy it's a bit better because at least Meloni has some significant degree of popular support. Mm-hmm. And Italians have been quite explicit, because war in Russia is one of the big issues. People are not interested in that at all.
Right.
And so in places like maybe Italy, Hungary, and a few other countries where the leading politicians have been explicit that like, hey, we did not join NATO, we did not join the EU to go to war.
Right.
And so people feel like, okay, our government is representing us. But in France, in Germany, where people are starting to think like, are you like kind of thinking about shoving us into that meat grinder? Because that's not our war. We don't want to have anything to do with that.
Right.
So discontent is growing. The economic crisis is there. Things are getting worse and worse. Inflation is getting higher. And so I don't know, Tom, how this story ends, but I see that the establishment is trying to again sabotage the legitimate democratic process. They're trying to co-opt this national rally, national assembly, whatever this new National Front in France is called, with Marine Le Pen. They've already been pretty well co-opted, and it's not even a shadow of the party of Marine Le Pen's father, Jean-Marie Le
Right.
Pen.
Right.
But even still, Macron is, his ensemble, they're trying to somehow finagle to again foist some kind of a fake populist government on the French people and preserve the status quo. Well, the status quo is what is completely unacceptable to people in France, to people in Britain, to people in Holland, to people in Germany. I don't know. I could go on. Probably Poland to a good extent. Romania, Moldova, Bulgaria.
Sure.
And so at some point, there's going to be a clash between the status quo defending political establishment, political class, and whoever their sponsors are, and the grassroots people movements.
Yeah.
So it's that thing. If the peaceful revolution is not allowed to happen, then you're going to get a violent revolution. Now, what does that mean? I don't know what that means, but maybe it means something like 1848, or maybe it means something like 1793. Maybe we're going to have storming of Bastille. Maybe the French are going to, lubricate up their guillotines and start chopping heads. I don't know. It's hard to, history sometimes takes us by surprise because, things that you didn't see coming actually happen. And then everybody's like, oh my God. But anyway, like that is the backdrop, that the discontent is real. The grievances are real. The political class, instead of trying to reform things, instead of trying to kind of hear the people's grievances and try to improve conditions of life, to distance themselves from this warmongering neocon, juggernaut. They're trying to keep the status quo. They're trying to still push for war. They're still feeding hundreds of billions of dollars or euros into the military-industrial complex. Not to mention destroying farmers. Not to mention destroying food production, not to mention, pushing still the cashless society, CBDCs, pandemics, vaccinations, all of this. It's all refusing to die. They're not giving up on any of it.
Right.
And so the clash is going to happen, and it's going to be real. And now, since we're talking also from the aspect of markets, what does that mean? To my mind, it can only mean one thing, which is a few things, and that's
Nicely played.
A collapse of the euro,
right?
Collapse of the European bonds.
Yep.
High or hyperinflation of the euro. And then a massive social, political, and economic crisis, which God only knows how it ends.
Yep.
But the EU falls apart. NATO falls apart.
Yep.
And we become wide open to revolutionary movements. We become wide open to terrorism. We become wide open to the takeover by primarily Russia and China, because people are gonna say, whatever the cost, whatever the price, make this stop.
Yep.
And then it's gonna be, are we going to go with the Western colonial system again? Are we going to fall to the old oligarchic banking families and their agendas, or are we going to pivot to the multipolar integrations and the new security architecture defined by Russians and the Chinese.
Right.
It's going to be interesting, and I predict that the old oligarchic banking families are not going to allow for that to happen, even though probably if people had to make an informed choice, they would say like, duh, of course we want these multipolar integrations. We want to trade with the side of the world that's flush with money, flush with growth, that's building high-speed railways, ports, trading routes, and so forth. But you know what happens then? You get encouraged to make a different choice through terrorism.
Mm-hmm.
And that's coming as well. So that's where we are.
Yep.
It's not happening yet, but it seems to me that we're on a good way of this starting to take shape.
Yeah, no, I think that's pretty obvious. So we're doing this on July 5th, and yesterday we had the British elections. We're between rounds of the French elections, and you can see from the results. It's funny going into this. I had high hopes that Reform UK would do well, and that they would upside surprise in the number of seats they would take. I didn't. I was not surprised to wake up this morning and see that they took 4 as opposed to the 13 the exit poll said. So the exit polls are always the Ipsos exit polls are always so accurate. And then somehow Reform underperforms by 9 seats. I should be surprised by this.
Yeah.
Not, right? So like someone didn't have their thumb on certain ridings in the UK yesterday. What a shock. Yeah. But you have And the narrative this morning coming out of Britain is when I could tell is, oh, look, we had this produced the most lopsided result in terms of number of seats versus support from the people that we've ever had in British politics, which is, again, it actually underscores your point perfectly, which is that the people are going to look at the system and go, this system needs to be reformed, fundamentally.
Yes.
Keir Starmer is going to rule over a government that has really a massive seat mandate, but no electoral mandate, right? And that's I don't even predict this Labor government to last very long. And then in France, we have the typical collapsing of the French deep state and the French political system around. It's like the French immune system to stop the interloper from from coming in and taking over. I read a great article this morning by Mark Stein, calling it, the French election system was designed to do exactly this, give us Tweedle left versus Tweedle right. But both of them, operate within a very narrow framework of whatever it is that the French deep state expects. We have the same thing here in the United States, for us or for better or for worse. But so it was really interesting for you to lead off, actually, with what your friend said about what's going on with the French military. I've identified for a long time that Macron's relationship with the French military is very tenuous. Alexander Mercouris used to make this point all the time, like going back 2-3 years ago, we used to talk about this. So I just want to, remind everybody that things we talked about, you and I and Alex and we all talked about in multiple levels over the last couple of years are still in effect and have now evolved and progressed to a potential tipping point. So this weekend's French second round could be very interesting because while the immune system may be, thinking, well, this is exactly what we'll normally do, and this is how we'll freeze out Le Pen from getting a majority, this is a different environment because she did take, like, the National Rally took, 36 seats in the first round? Well, they've never taken more than 3 in the first round. So this is a big deal. And and the other thing I'm going to push back just a little bit on everything. I agree with everything. I'm going to push back just a little bit, which is the following. I think Marine Le Pen is a very skilled political operator and understands very well that you, at a certain level, you can't lob fire and brimstone in a system that's designed to give you center left, center right, milquetoast results and get anywhere. That you have to play this silly game. And in some ways, I think that's a good way of describing what's going on with Giorgia Meloni in Italy as well. You have to go along to stay in the game, even though your heart hasn't changed. I don't think Marine Le Pen is any less a radical than she was when, her dad was running a party, personally. But I think that she's become very skilled over the last 20 years of playing the French political game in order to put herself in this position. I may be wrong, but that's my read on the subject, and we'll see if I'm right about that.
No, I think that you may well be right. It is definitely true that you can't, like in today's environment, you can't just come out and say what you think.
Right.
You have to kind of play curveballs and choose. Like you have to choose very carefully what battles you're gonna fight, because you end up instantly getting politically, personally, not personally like physically, but you get politically assassinated, or they destroy your character. So there are certain sacred cows that you cannot touch. So you can't come out and say like, hey, like climate change is a hoax. That's not even real. So you have to pretend like something. You can't come out and say, Israel is committing war crimes and they should be accountable for that.
Or if you elect me, we're going to leave the euro. Like, we can't have that as a party.
You can't say that. You can't say that you're going to leave the NATO. You can't say that you think that Ukraine is a military dictatorship and we shouldn't support them.
Right.
And so I think you may be right. Maybe that's just political posturing of a survivor who wants to have longevity in French politics. And like as they say, if you live in the house of blind, you don't go rearranging the furniture. So you have to kind of keep things as they are, and then make changes where you can without getting killed instantly.
Well, and wait for the electorate. And what you're really doing is you're waiting for the electorate to come to you.
Yes.
In a sense. And this is, I think, because when I look around and that's what I'm seeing in France. The electorate has finally come around to Marine Le Pen, and they're ready for her to do the job that she wanted to do 15 years ago. In the same way that Giorgia Meloni, as disappointing as she may be to populists around the world to this point, she still gets 30% support in Italy. Okay?
Yeah.
And everybody else has fallen off the wayside. So I was looking at Italian polling the other day, or I guess this actually not the other day, like the other hour, because I look at European polling like every day. The latest polls I see out of Italy is that everybody other than the PD, which is the Democrats, and the Brothers of Italy, are polling in single digits. Like, there are no more M5S at 12% or Forza Italia pushing towards 10% or Lega holding on to double digits. They've all collapsed below 10% support now. And it's 30% Brothers of Italy, 24% PD. I'm not happy about PD now having 24%, right? Because they're the deep state. But it's still you're getting a clarification of what's happening.
Yeah.
And the other point that Mark Stein made about French politics is that the young people in France are not voting centrist. They are all either radical left or radical right, meaning they're either in Jean-Luc Mélenchon's corner or I don't know if Eric Zemmour is actually in this election, but in that side of the French corner, whereas Le Pen has carved out an acceptable position in the middle to grab both of them to get the majority that she may actually enjoy after this, and then you win, and then you do what needs to be done. Thoughts on that?
No, I think that makes sense as you describe it, but that's also part of the frustration of the situation, is that it's very, very difficult to read who stands where. So like it seems that we all have the choice now of voting for the person that we hate the least, and then hoping that their actual positions are actually better than their declared positions.
Yes.
And that they might deliver us from this doom. from evil. Well, you could say the same thing of Trump.
Oh, absolutely.
It's like this everywhere practically.
Absolutely.
And so
Absolutely.
it makes it very, very difficult to read, to gauge the political winds in Europe and across the West, I guess, because people just cannot state their positions openly anymore.
No.
Look at what they did. Look at what they did to Jeremy Corbyn just for daring to be supportive of Palestinian causes.
Of course.
He's like a political corpse,
Yeah.
in spite of the fact that he actually had very, very strong support within Labour.
Yes.
Somehow they crucified him, and his now they have Keir Starmer that everybody hates, but there he is.
Yep. Well, what's interesting about Corbyn and Starmer in British politics is that this is very much so what I said about the split between at the top of the British hierarchy, that there was the old Britain kind of neoconservative, McKinderist wing of the Brit, and then there was the quote unquote Davos globalist, the Tony Blair, David Cameron wing that was really represented by, I would think, the civil service in Britain. That one, they've won completely. They did, and the tell was when they all came out as pro-Palestinian. Because remember, like, Britain is the birthplace of Israel, right?
Yes.
And so, the Israeli pro-Palestinian split since October 7th, that was always that was my read on this ages ago when I started looking at Israeli politics and how that was, sliding back and forth between Netanyahu and then Bennett and then this one and then that one. And every 6 months there was another election. Same thing that was happening in the UK over Brexit. It was clearly a power struggle between old colonial continental Europe surrounding the EU and old British royalist, or I don't know, imperialist, old British imperialist factions. And those two factions have split, and they both are jockeying for position within the American government and trying to use the Americans to triangulate one versus the other over Israeli and Palestinian pro-Palestinian policy. And it's all just a big mess in my mind. And then in the end, everybody loses. Everybody's the victim. The British people don't get what they want. The European people don't get what they want. The Palestinians are getting slaughtered. The Israelis, the Israeli Jews who are having their country torn apart. And the American people have a government that's completely and utterly out of control, sending hundreds of billions of dollars around the world to kill everyone and be hated by everyone. And so we're all victims of this. And it just seems, it's so very obvious that it's just classic, cynical, political power plays amongst the worst people imaginable. And the systems and the institutions of a nonviolent nature, the political nature, have been so thoroughly corrupted, as you beautifully pointed out early on. We're gonna reach the end of those.
Yeah.
And then all bets are off.
Yeah, it's I'm afraid we're gonna see pitchfork time.
Mm-hmm.
We're gonna see pitchforks in the street, probably first in France.
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't know why I think that, but I see that the French people have the least tolerance for bullshit of their political classes. And at the same time, I see that their political classes are maybe the most degenerated, most it's hard for me to explain this, but I'm trying to observe what's going on and read between the lines, and I see that every so often. I think there's been at least 3 very obvious episodes over the last 20 years that France gets utterly humiliated by the Anglo-American establishment.
Mm-hmm.
They get a little bit uppity, and then they get slammed down hard. But rather than saying like, hey, we're not treating well in this club, we need to tread our own path and assert our own independent way, they kind of lick their wounds and then fold back as a lapdog of the. And I'll explain what I mean by this.
Sure, please do.
France has colonized Haiti for 150 years, maybe longer. I don't know exactly, but France has had a very long relationship with Haiti. It's been extreme plunder that's kept Haiti impoverished for centuries. And the benefit of Haiti's production of coffee, sugar, tobacco, whatever, have all practically accrued to the French elites, to the French banking elites. So fast forward, the United States is preparing invasion of Iraq in 2003. And Jacques Chirac is the president of France, and his minister of foreign affairs is the Gaullist Jacques de Villepin.
Mm-hmm.
And so when the United States was trying to make the case and get the United Nations Security Council authorizations to go into Iraq, France said, no, we're not convinced. You didn't make your case. And they were opposed. They stood in opposition.
Mm-hmm.
And in the meantime, the United States brought Jean-Bertrand Aristide to power in Haiti.
Yep.
And he had his CIA handler there. And then all of a sudden and out of the blue, Jean-Bertrand Aristide launches this very loud campaign of demanding restitution from France for their colonial plunder. And Jean-Bertrand Aristide comes up magically with a number that's down to a cent. So it's like 21,678,000,000 blah 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 and 48 cents, something like this.
Right.
But it really is 21.6.7 billion dollars that they're demanding for France in restitution for all this colonial plunder. And so it causes an absolute scandal for France because the French diplomacy is in a panic. They're like, we can't even entertain this because this will set a precedent. And then all of our other colonial dependencies are going to say like, hey, we want another 20 billion and we want 50 billion and we want 10 billion and, whatever. Right. So the French are, no, we can't have this. And but what happened is that they dropped their opposition to the U.S. invasion of Iraq.
Right.
And it was a backroom dealing. Not only that, but then I think 2 years later, France also joined the NATO. Because before that, they were like, no, we're not going to have anything to do with this. We're not going to be part of NATO. And so it seems to me that the French got their chain yanked and that they fell into line again. Okay, so that was one episode. And then Jean-Bertrand Aristide in a coup executed together by French and US, the same CIA handler that brought Aristide to power, came to his house and said like to Mr. and Mrs. Aristide, that was 29 February 2004. Y'all are gonna board the plane that's waiting for you. And the other choice was, a bullet in the head. And so that's how Aristide was taken out of Haiti. France called a bunch of other African countries to see who's going to host it. Central African Republic said, fine, you can send him here. So they sent him to the Central African. And then the whole issue of restitution just disappeared, gone. Haiti no longer requires 21.687 billion and 48 cents from France. So I thought, that's interesting, like that's so weird, because they had billboards in Haiti. This was
Right.
They made a public ruckus about this. They got people fired up about this. France has to pay us these 22 billion dollars, and people like, wow, this is real. This is, our democratically elected president is pushing this, and we have seemingly US support for this. And then France and the US, France, they prostrated themselves, they fell into line. The United States, okay, good boy, we're going to rid you of this meddlesome Aristide, and we're going to forget about the $22 billion. Okay. Another episode was, remember, when was it? 3, 4, 2. Okay, so the current president, Emmanuel Macron, same guy, right, as we have today. He was starting to talk about, we have to talk to the Russians.
Mm-hmm.
NATO is a brain-dead organization. It's useless. We need to respect Russia's security concerns. And then he went to China.
Yep.
And he made a bunch of independent deals with China. And it seemed that at that moment, Macron was starting to kind of chart an independent course for France. That they finally decided, we are the second-class member of this Anglo-American club, and we're going to go with independent, and we're going to be talking to Chinese, and we're going to be talking to the Russians, and we're going to get out of this freaking NATO boondoggle.
Mm-hmm.
And then all of a sudden, the police kill this Tunisian youth in Paris, and all of France suddenly explodes in indignation and anger, right? And there's riots all over France. I don't know, was this last summer or 2 summers ago?
I don't quite remember when this happened, Alex. I'm sorry. I don't have. I probably wasn't. I was probably ignoring France at that point.
It was either last summer, or it was a summer. It was even southern.
It was recent. It was recent. It would be around the beginnings of the Russian invasion of Ukraine.
Yeah, so it was either summer of 22 or summer of 23. I don't know. I'm in a fog now, but so France is exploding. The French rioters even make a point of attacking a group of Chinese tourists in Marseille.
Right.
The country seems like it's the Bastille Day all over again. And then all of a sudden, the whole thing dies. It goes away. And the explanation given by the mainstream media is an insult. So it's so obviously not true. It's something else.
Right.
The explanation that the mainstream media gave is that it was the drug lords in France who decided that all these riots are very bad for their drug dealing business. So they sent out their dealers to discourage all these Muslim youths from rioting. And then they said, like, oh, okay, well, I guess if it's bad for your business, sorry, we didn't mean nothing by it. And the whole thing just went away. In the space of about 6 days.
Okay.
And so that's obviously complete nonsense. It was
right.
It was one of these color revolution techniques that was let loose in France. I think it was a warning to Macron to say, okay, Macron, you think you're going to be charting your own course? You're going to be making deals with China and with Russia, and you're going to be taking Russia's security concern into account? we can get rid of you very easily, just as we got rid of Yanukovych in Ukraine.
Yeah.
And then again, this time Macron prostrated himself, sorry, fell back into line, never talked about Russian security concerns again. On the contrary, he's been pushing for sending French troops into Ukraine, sending more weapons to Ukraine, sending long-range missiles to Ukraine, Caesar howitzers, all of these things. So he completely turned around. What was it? 360 degrees, right? And that story died again. So France falls back into line as a second-class member of the ruling oligarchies in the West. The third example that I'm aware of is the AUKUS deal, where they just got slapped out of the club unceremoniously. Their contract with Australian Navy torn and given to the British and the Americans, who couldn't even deliver.
Right.
But just like a brazen humiliation of France.
Yes.
And again, France folded. And then I'm not sure how the thing played out with the French, how do you call it, colonies in Africa, their colonial dependencies in Africa. But there was some kind of a deal where the American military bases there, they were supposed to protect also French interests.
Yes.
But they didn't. They just threw the French overboard, and they tried to protect American interests.
Mm-hmm.
And then there was again, and then I'm not sure how things washed in Syria, in Lebanon, but I also know that the French were majorly shafted in the Middle East as well. So it's just.
I can give you another example of the same thing. Ready? The JCPOA. Yeah. The JCPOA. I've been saying this for years.
There you go. Yeah.
The JCPOA was designed as a way to get Iran back into the global economy. The first thing that happened, I mean, literally, JCPOA is signed in July. By August, Total, the French oil major, signs a multi-billion-dollar deal with Iran to develop. I think it's one of the Pars gas fields, either North Pars or South Pars. I don't quite remember off the top of my head. I remember $4.2 billion, and it was a big deal. And then Trump comes in, and then Putin moves into Syria in the end of September in 2015. Netanyahu screaming bloody murder. Trump comes to power, and the British and American Anglo-sphere, that portion of it, gets Trump to abrogate the JCPOA, put ruinous sanctions on Iran, and that contract has to be torn up and sold back to Gazprom.
Okay. Yeah, there you go.
So, but I also think that, I mean, I don't think that story is as simple as you just laid it out, but it's a very interesting framework that I think you put together on this.
It's not simple, but the problem is that it's very difficult to read, because how does this happen? How does this French, which is, like it or not, it's a major power in the heart of Europe.
Yes.
And it's been traditionally a major rival to Britain.
Mm-hmm.
How do they always fold? And they get shafted, and they get screwed, and they get defrauded and humiliated time and time and time again. Yet they never. And I always regarded Emmanuel Macron as a frontman for the French elites.
Right.
But the French elites were getting screwed there. Total, the
right. So what I would say on this is the following. Just to throw back at this is that we are talking about a punch drunk. This is like the round 10 of a heavyweight fight between two guys who've landed so many body blows at each other over the last 200 years. That, again, I've always described this as who's going to control the post-war European order, Britain or France and Germany, right? Is it going to be the French? And even France and Germany don't see eye to eye on everything, because Germany has its.
Especially if Le Pen becomes president, this is not good.
Right.
We're going to be lucky if they talk to each other at all.
Exactly.
She hates the Germans. She freaking hates the Germans.
And another reason why I like her so much. Okay. So I'm speaking as an Italian. So, but this thing is really complicated because, again, remember, Macron has been pushing for the European army, the end of NATO, or at least the folding of NATO into European security architecture. They all want a new security architecture, which excludes the United States. We now have who's taking over as the NATO General Secretary. It's Mark Rutte of the Netherlands is taking over for Stoltenberg. So we have a quote unquote Davosian Weffer taking over NATO. As opposed to Ben Wallace, who was supposed to take over last year. Remember, that was all supposed to happen. So this thing is very, very complicated. And I've always looked at Macron as the guy wanting to assert the French military industrial complex as being the new weapons supplier for a rebuilt, remilitarized Europe. And then, so you're running up against American interests on this point. You're running up against British geopolitical imperatives. And so it's easy for those two groups to get together and slap France down. And I think it's not necessarily that it breaks down by country, but it breaks down by faction within each country. And it's a little bit more complicated.
Yes, I don't disagree with what you said. In fact, I think that it is exactly like that. But this is exactly why it's very difficult for me to try to interpret this.
Of course.
And I can't quite understand it, because I thought, like these French elites, the banking elites, the corporate elites, how do they get screwed so regularly and still, it's like you're trying to be a member of a club that treats you like a second class member. That
right. Well, I mean,
the other butt and puts kick me sticker on the back, and you still want to be with the cool guys. They hate you, they humiliate you, and so last data point.
Wait, they're the Charlie Brown of the Western Alliance.
Yes, but they insist. They're. It's like they have no national pride at that level. Like the French people have national pride.
Yes, they
French
do.
elites, it seems that they have no national pride.
No, of course not.
Okay, so what's the mystery? Okay, so last week I'm watching this interview with Pepe Escobar. I think it was Dialogue Works, Nima Al-Khurshid, with Pepe Escobar. And Pepe Escobar has been living in Paris for many, many years.
Right.
And so Pepe Escobar says, in Paris, everybody knows. Emmanuel Macron does what Alexander the Rothschild tells him to do.
Mm-hmm.
That's his puppet masters. That's who he has to listen to. And, interesting, because that's where he comes from. He used to be a Rothschild banker, right? Mm-hmm. That's who brought him to power. And so this is easy for me to believe. And in that case, that might explain why France accepts this second fiddle role in these global oligarchic elites, right? Because through history, it seems to me that when push comes to shove, the family works together.
Yep.
And so maybe the deal is we screwed you over here and we screwed you over there, but don't worry, stay on board, don't break the ranks. We're going to make you whole.
Yep.
Right. Even if people who are in control of Total and Airbus and all of these French industries get completely screwed, don't worry. We're going to credit you're going to buy it all under your name, and your position in France is going to be even higher. And so then he calls up Macron and says, never mind all this China business, never mind Russia, just war.
Here's one for you. You brought up Airbus just now. We have the Boeing, the continuing destruction of Boeing here in the United States.
Yes.
If you don't think that they're playing that's not the Gibbs, right? Look, Macron, we're going to take AUKUS away from you. We're going to take this away, but we're going to destroy Boeing so that we can prop up Airbus. And if you note over the last couple of years, as Boeing has been systematically like exposed as a mess and blah 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 blah. And every time something goes wrong with a Boeing plane, it becomes the biggest story of the Overton window of that 24 hours. Whereas nothing ever seems to happen to Airbus. Only one time in the last couple of years has Airbus been associated with any of these bad moments in air travel. And we know that these people want to destroy air travel and the free movement of people. You destroy Boeing, you destroy one of the diamond industries of the United States. It's a very important thing that has to be destroyed. So it's this big tug. It's the grand. All of these things kind of still fit in under the rubric of our goals are exactly the same. We have to destroy the Russians and steal all their stuff to then place a wedge between us and China. The colonial powers of Europe are on board with this. The Brits are on board with this. Some of the Americans are still on board with this. And it's a big fight as to whether or not they're going to be able to get everybody together for the big win, to go do the thing, to get rid of Putin. And it gets messy at the edges. And when you try to analyze any of the stuff specifically through the rubric of the individual countries and not the greater globalist project, it can get very confusing. I think that's the best way to kind of put all this.
Absolutely agreed. And then this also suggests that there's some kind of a civil war going on among these elites themselves.
Absolutely.
That the big dogs are actually that they have decided to have the smaller, lesser dogs for lunch.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
So if I were a second tier family in France, I'd be very worried at this point.
Absolutely. Moreover, and so Alex, now we bring it back to the second round of the French elections this weekend. If Macron is this compromised a figure, right? He is this, he has been given the impossible task of trying to manage France's second fiddle nature within the big globalist project. And he's their best chance to continue to roll the ball forward. Yeah. And he's this tenuous. How bad is the state of the globalist project? It goes right back to what you were discussing at the beginning of the podcast, when you start to really analyze what's happening. So to me, it all, in its own weird way, if you start writing down all the elements of this, a pattern starts to emerge here that this is their moment of desperation. Let's take you one step further. Go back to the lead up to Putin's inauguration in May. The French were talking about, oh yeah, we're going to send troops in and we're going to do this and we're going to do that and blah, 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 blah. And then the Russians pulled the French ambassador to Russia into the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. They talked with him for 45 minutes and then he walks out and he says, there will be no French troops in Ukraine. Why? Well, the obvious answer is because if you guys don't stop this, we're going to nuke France. That's why. And everybody was like, okay, yeah, that's a no-go. Yeah. Like I think we have like who's actually in charge of the situation. And then the worst part about this, from my perspective, now you're in France, I'm in the United States, and I look at this and I say, well, what's the problem here? Well, the problem is they're trying to get the United States across the finish line to come in and finish their project for them. And the United States is clearly saying no, but yet we still have people within the American government trying to push this thing across the finish line. So it's all a mess. And we have a fight amongst oligarchs here in the US. We have a fight amongst the oligarchy in the UK, but that has landed squarely on the side of the continent. And then you have the continent itself still trying, and are still trying to get the Americans to come in. That's why von der Leyen is out there calling Viktor Orban an appeaser this morning. We're literally doing this as Viktor Orban is in Moscow as the new head of the European Council, going on a peace tour to try and stop this war.
Yeah.
And the French and German interests are all screaming bloody murder, and the British are all screaming bloody murder. So,
yeah,
it's clear what their priorities are, is I guess what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. That's very clear. But I wanted to. This will seem like I'm jumping completely into a different topic, but it's all very, very much related.
Go for it.
And this is going to be your domain of expertise more than mine. I've noticed that we had since 2020 we had the greatest bear market in bonds in the United States history.
Mm-hmm.
And now we see that the bond prices are moving higher,
mm-hmm.
and then the interest rates are slowly coming down. And I was wondering what the hell's up with that, because I don't see improvements anywhere. It's like things are getting worse, not
Mm-hmm.
better. Yet
Right.
the bond prices are going up, interest rates are going down. Now I'm thinking, is this some kind of a manipulation that should get Biden over the line in November, and that should allow the U.S. Treasury to roll over like $1 trillion of debt that needs to be rolled over at not, because if they roll them over a very high interest rate, it's kind of shit.
Yes.
And so are they trying? Are they somehow manipulating this higher just for the political gain in November? Does that mean that after November we're going to have like boom, the bottom fall out?
It's a good question, and what I'll say is the following: it's what I've been saying for a long time. I still feel that our treasonous Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen is still manipulating, along with Christine Lagarde at the ECB and the other European central banks that are tied to their exchange rate whose currencies are tied to the exchange rate of the euro. So we saw the Swedish Riksbank cut rates. We saw the Czech bank cut by 50 basis points. The Swiss have cut twice. Canada cut, even though I know that the Canadian banks are not down with Justin Trudeau at all. That this is a means by which to keep credit spreads between Europe and the U.S. within a very, very tight range that keeps the European bank from imploding. Okay, and so if you look at long-term bond yield charts for the United States, they're all very bearish, meaning the yields are bullish and prices are bearish. You look at the quarterly chart of the U.S. 10-year; it's very clearly in a new secular bear market for bond prices in the U.S. So your observation is correct, and they are manipulating, but they're manipulating in order to try to keep the bottom from falling out of Europe. And what we're seeing is the beginnings of capital flight, even into the U.S., overwhelming even some of this other stuff, and it's being used.
Oh, okay. So you think it's capital flight?
I think it's capital flight into the U.S. I think so here's one for you. I went through, because I chart this every twice a week for my patrons. At the end of every Sunday, I post, okay, so what was the relative performance of all the major indices, or not all the major indices, but a lot of them, like the Dow, the NASDAQ, the Nikkei, the DAX, the Eurostoxx 50, and emerging markets ETF. And I just go through, and who was the big winner this week, who was the big loser, and using the Dow as the reference point, right? Because the Dow is your, as Martin Armstrong would put it, is your reference point for capital inflow or outflow into U.S. blue chips, right? As an international flow of international capital. And the Dow in the first half of 2024 was the worst performing of all these indexes. So it underperformed the DAX. It underperformed the NASDAQ by a lot. It underperformed even the Eurostoxx 50. It underperformed the Nikkei by a lot. And there's all different reasons for this. But the two important ones, and I didn't look at like the French CAC 40 or the FTSE 100. So I probably should have. But I note that the Dow was the laggard, even though the Dow was up slightly. So if all these other ones are, so what do we have? We had a rotation out of currencies and Eurozone debt. Central banks coming in to support the bond prices, but it was sending stocks up. It was out of stocks, out of bonds. The first rotation is into stocks, and then from domestic stocks into international stocks and or international bonds. Just from a if you think about your average French investor, your average German investor, what's he going to do with his money? He's not going to move it necessarily overseas first. He's going to move from domestic bonds to domestic stocks, and then from there go, oh no, forget it, my country's screwed. Now I'm going to move into international markets to try and offset currency risk. Currency risk. So when you start to think of it in those terms, the Dow being the laggard over the first half of the year makes it the most attractive horse at the glue factory coming into the second half of the year, especially in light of everything that happened around the end of Q2. The last 2 trading days of Q2 were the Biden-Trump debate, and then all of those Supreme Court decisions, which basically gutted the administrative state in the U.S. Chevron, Jarkissi, the ruling in favor of Trump and the J6 defendants, blah, 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 blah. And the hits have just kept coming from the Supreme Court. Like, it hasn't stopped. So that's all saying, okay, everybody who's on the fence about whether or not the United States has control of its own political system, oh, by the way, the doors are opening back up for business. You're not going to have to worry about the EPA, just gutting your investment 3 months from now because some third-class functionary with purple hair and a nose ring decided to, insert themselves into your business. Yeah. Okay. They can't do that anymore. And so we're in this like moment where I see all of that, as you said at the beginning of the podcast, and I'll turn the mic back over to you in just a second, that all of these things are simmering below the surface from a sociological perspective, from a political perspective on the ground, from the people. What I'm seeing in the capital markets and amongst the central banks is the exact same thing. They've held the markets within these very, very tight ranges. There's no moves to be made other than in gold, silver, and a couple of other, and oil for the most part. That's pretty much it. And oil was the thing screaming that they can't control everything because oil bottomed in early June and then went on a massive tear and has been up. It's up $11 a barrel, and they're desperately trying to hold the euro between $1.06 and $1.08, while oil is breaking out to the upside because Lagarde needs to continue to front that she's got inflation under control, when clearly she's about to get hit with a second wave of commodity cost push inflation that's going to literally destroy what's left of her credibility. And Powell went to the ECB and walked into the ECB's house and said, I see inflation expectations in the United States staying way above 2% until the end of 2026. Translation, suck it, Chrissy, higher for longer.
Longer, yeah. And I have to mention this, Tom. I don't know if you remember, you'll remember, but I think you and I talked at some point, I think it's February 22.
Okay.
And we had a chat like this. And at one point I was like, oh my God, whatever you were saying, I thought like, oh my God, that means that the yen's going to collapse. Remember? And that was the yen was at about 115 to the dollar, 115 yen to the dollar.
Right.
And then it shot up to about 150. Today we are past 160 yen to the dollar.
Yes.
And then the Nikkei is within a hair of all-time highs.
Yes.
So Japan is imploding. Japan is in the process of imploding, and I don't know what's going to happen there. It's
funny. I know. I remember, and I think I pushed back into it. I said yes, the yen is going to implode, but then at some point, the Japanese government is going to make a fundamental policy shift that will arrest that well before everybody. When people start talking in those terms, they're like, "Oh, the yen's going to 300," or and it's all going to dogs and cats living together. I'm like, no, the short yen trade to the extreme short yen trade, the kind of I like to use the Kyle Bass trade, is the widowmaker trade. Every time someone has ever said that this is what was going to happen, and it wasn't accompanied with either a government shift or a policy shift in Japan, they got their asses handed to them. And so all I'm telling everybody is be careful what you wish for. The Japanese are going to allow, and they have allowed the long end of their yield curve to rise dramatically. The only thing they're still sitting on is the 10-year. But that's part of the whole yield curve control thing that everybody's playing in the West in order to keep bond yields under control. But if you look at the longer end of the Japanese yield curve, like the 20, the 30, the 40, and the 50, it's all like 2.7, 2.8%. It's huge. The Japanese yield curve, by the way, has no inversions in it right now. It's still like one of the only major economy yield curves that's actually normal. I mean, it's 3 points too low, but it's normal. Okay. So the Japanese have a lot of cards to play. They're still the Fed's wingman. I think we're going to see the 10 years. I think you're going to see a dramatic rise in the Japanese 10-year, and along with targeted
rises in rising yields.
Yeah, rise in yields is what I mean. It's going to go to 1.5, 1.8%, and it's going to shock everybody. Just like Japan shocked everybody when they started loosening yield curve control, right? That policy hasn't changed. There's political turmoil at the top of Japan. And from what I've discussed with Japanese investors who are prominent members of my community who have been studying Japan and trading in Japan for far longer than you and I have ever like really given it serious thought. Like that's what they do with their life. They're saying what's going to happen is they're waiting for the right moment, the right set of policies to get Japanese internationals, multinationals like Toyota and Honda, and Yamaha and whatnot to repatriate their funds that are held overseas back to Japan. And when they get when they craft the right set of policies, being tax, fiscal, this, that, everything else, when that happens, there's going to be a big wave back into Japan, which will stabilize the yen. But the yen may go to 200 first, but then it's not going to go to 300 or 400, or it's not going to spiral out of control. It's going to hit, it's going to crest, and then it's going to fall over. We may be at that crest now in the 160s. I'm not making that prediction right now, but the general shape of that trade, I think, is still in play. But your original assessment back in 22, which I made a note to make sure that it's in the show notes for everybody to listen to that moment. This was a great moment. I have it. It'll be in the show notes for this episode, so everybody can go back and listen to it again. Because I remember I remember doing this and watching your face just like light up. It was brilliant. It was such a wonderful moment. You guys don't see the video of these. We only do these as audio. So, but yeah, I will make sure that everybody. But you'll be able to just imagine what Alex's face looks like when that happens. Yeah, we'll definitely have that in there. But you're not wrong. It's just that I'm just trying to put more color on the shape of the trade. Okay, so.
I think that the best way to describe that moment was like when a dog like suddenly snaps to attention and then tilts his head sideways. That was that moment. Yeah.
I think I had come up with something just to remind everybody, and we'll start winding down here in a minute. As Alex and I reminisce, was like, I think that morning or the day before, we had come up with some variation on my quote unquote thesis about the Fed. And I'm like, I can't wait to hit Alex between the eyes with this one. His eyes are just going to bug out of his head. And if just for everybody's, so everybody knows, like whenever I have Alex on the podcast, or at least in the past, it's always been that moment where I like thrown this thing at him cold, and he's just like, and it's a little unfair that I would do that to you, but you and I have done so many podcasts together. It's like, how do we keep them?
No, that's cool. That's cool. I like surprises, particularly the ones that I don't expect.
and there it is, folks. The patented Alex Krainer dry humor joke of the day. With that said, my friend, I'm really glad we got a chance to sit and chat this morning. There's so many more things we could talk about, but I want to try and keep these at a reasonable length. So with that said, is there anything else you want to notify people of what you think is important?
Yes, I do. I do actually.
Yeah. Okay.
I do actually, because this is something that I've written about, I've talked about it, but I see that it still hasn't kind of caught on. All these last, I don't know, 20, 30 years that I've been trying to figure out and the reason why I've been doing it for so long is because I found myself at war at one point, and afterwards I was like, what the hell was that all about, you know? And so I've been trying to figure out how does this happen? Where's the war drive coming from? I just want to say that after 30 years of research, I worked it out to the banking establishments. And here's the reason why. Because they are the only ones with the clearest motive, the clearest incentive for it, because it's the collateral, as you and I have talked about many times. And then, because people see these global multinational corporations, and then they associate the colonial style abuse with Exxon and Shell and BP and
Right.
Kellogg, Brown and Root and corporations like this, but they are they are the executors. We have to understand that even if you take a corporation like BP, and that let's say BP goes and develops an oil field in Nigeria, who funds that is irrelevant. BP will just as happily take a loan from Gazprom Bank or VTB Bank in Russia, or from a Chinese bank, as they will from JP Morgan and or Goldman Sachs, right? So They don't care. Equally, BP might just as happily decide to buy that oil off of a Nigerian company or a Russian company or whoever, slap their margin and sell it in their own domestic market, and still have a burgeoning business of it.
Mm-hmm.
The only group for whom it's do or die, everything or nothing, whether they get to fund the development or whether a Russian or Chinese or Nigerian bank funds the development, is the banking groups.
Yes.
So they are the only ones with the clear incentive to wrest control of the resources by force.
Yes. And
I think that we have to understand that, because they want us to go fight the Chinese. They want us to go fight, American boys and girls are being prepped for war against China in the Pacific.
Yep.
We here in Europe are being prepped for war against Russia forever.
Mm-hmm.
And why should that be? Why can't we just buy Russian gas and oil and wheat and whatever, and sell them our, leather goods and cars and whatever the hell we produce here? Why can't we just trade, and then everybody's better off? That would be good for big corporations as well. Peace, stability, and good trade. Everybody wants this.
Yep.
Including the big abusive corporations, right?
And in some ways, even some of the biggest banks want this. Mostly the community banks want this.
Yeah, definitely. I'm not talking about savings and loans and community banks. I'm talking about GSIBs, the ones who are, huddled around the Bank of International Settlement in Basel.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I'm talking about. And I just want to mention this, because once you're aware of it, once you're aware of what to pay attention to, you'll see it everywhere and all the time.
Yes.
There's no doubt about that. So
absolutely right. You're absolutely right, Alex. And it's really it's important. It's an important way to put a bow around this podcast. Is to make that point very, very clear.
Because we don't want our kids to end up like Ukrainian parents' kids.
No.
We have to make sure that doesn't happen. And to make sure that doesn't happen, we have to know exactly where the incentive is coming from, who's pushing it, and how.
Right.
And again, like, once you know what to pay attention to, you will see it all the time and everywhere.
Yeah.
There's no doubt.
And what I'll say as an addendum to that is the following. I agree with you completely. And I want people to understand that when I say nice things about the Federal Reserve, or I say nice things about the American banking class, I only say that in the context of them fighting an even worse group of rapacious locusts-like bankers. I'm all for allowing them to be my in my corner for the next couple of years to get us past the war in
Yes.
order to, start recapitalizing, say, my country or yours or whatever, because there's plenty to rebuild. There's plenty of lending opportunities given the
Yes.
amount
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
capital construction that has actually happened over the last 80 years. And then I'll fight those people later.
Yeah. But
I will
like
never
I
take
even
my eye off the ball that they're still the evil sons of bitches who need to be debanked, for lack of a better term.
Well, here's what I mean, Tom. I don't mean this at all. Like, let's go hang all the bankers.
Right.
Let's grab them and hang them all, because banking institutions are delivering a service that can be very valuable to society.
Absolutely.
But the bankers have to be put into their sandbox.
Exactly.
And the incentives for misbehavior have to be removed.
Yes.
And then we're fine. Then we're all good. If banking is just functioning as a public utility, as something that makes the finances trade and development and industry and good things that everybody wants, then they deliver a phenomenally valuable service to society. But if you do like the Committee to Save the World, Greenspan and Clinton and Larry Summers, and you remove all the strings that limit their maneuvering space, and you let them like, hey, you own the world, do what you want, then you get pathogenic misbehavior.
I agree.
And so they just need to be put back into their box, like Vladimir Putin has done in Russia.
Yep.
And any parent knows this. If you set no limits, you get chaos. You get a disaster. Yeah. So where there could be harmony and joy and peace and love, you get mayhem. Just because you didn't set limits.
Yes, no, absolutely. I mean, look, at the end of the day, the phrase that everybody needs to remind themselves of what the banks are supposed to do, it's called net interest margin. You have to get banks back to doing net interest margin, classic risk assessment of and let the banks get their 3% for figuring out whether this is a good investment or a bad investment. That's what their job is supposed to be. They take our money, hold on to it, go invest it, and then we share the profits off the investment 50-50 or 60-40 or 30-70 or whatever the numbers are, but that's their net interest margin. They sell the money, they sell the investment for 6%, they take 3, we get 3, everybody wins. Exactly. And they got paid 3 for outsourcing so that we outsource to them doing the risk assessment because we don't know. We're dumb. We're not experts in this. They're supposed to be subject matter experts in risk assessment. Same thing with insurance companies and everybody else. We have short-circuited all of that and turned all of this into a kind of quasi-governmental structure that does nothing but suck money in, take all the profit, and distribute nothing in return. And that is, I mean, dude, I now sound like a friggin' card-carrying Marxist when I say this, but that criticism of the process is not wrong. The criticism is where does, you either make banking free, i.e. free banking of like a Rothbardian style free banking system. Everybody is free to fail or succeed according to their wits, or you have a fully government one. And I've been saying for how many years now, our fight is today is an ideological one between the private versus public formation of capital and whether or not the individual is sovereign over their government or not. Those are the two fundamental ideological perspectives that we are fighting at this point. And that's when you and I sit down and talk about any of these things, that's where I'm coming from. That's what we're identifying. Those are the fulcrums, and those are the fulcra on which all of this depends. And if we can remind ourselves of those two fundamental ideas, that's where the ideological war is, and that is what they're trying to dismantle on a daily basis. In the United States, in its conception, was designed to be on the one side of that argument. And old colonial Europe is squarely, the old European banking class is squarely on the other side. Colonialism, serfdom, extraction, wealth extraction, and all the rest.
Exactly. And that's what needs to be reformed.
Completely. All right, Alex. We're in an hour and 20 minutes. This sounds like a perfect place to end. So, my friend,
Very
as
good.
always, you have a wonderful weekend. Enjoy and hopefully France does not descend into civil war between now and the next time you and I talk.
I really hope so. I really hope so. And I wish you and all your compatriots happy Independence Day. It's a long weekend.
Thank you.
Hopefully going on to better things.
Yeah. Hopefully.
Humanity.
We'll talk again. Yep. And we'll talk again. All right, man.
Take care.
Be well.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Well, that'll about wrap it up for episode 182 of the Gold, Goats, and Guns podcast. As always, I want to thank my guest, Alex Krainer, for a lively and just enjoyable discussion. Alex is one of my favorite people in this entire business to chat with. And I mean that both professionally and personally. He's just a wonderful soul. So with that said, as always, you can follow my work over at my blog at goldgoatsandguns.com. You can follow me on Twitter at TFL1728. You can sign up for the Patreon where Dexter White and I do our very best to stay ahead of the curve at Patreon/goldgoatsandguns, where you can sign up for just the twice weekly market reports and private blogs and podcasts, or you can add in the Gold, Goats, and Guns monthly newsletter where we do all original material and try and tie all of this up into a coherent portfolio strategy to help you make sense of the entire world. So with that said, I'm out. You guys be well. You take care. We'll talk soon. Keep your stick on the ice.